The preseason is over. The next time the Texans are on the field to play a game, it'll be in Indianapolis against the Colts in week 1 of the 2024 season. But before they get there, they got to figure out who's on this roster. Coming out of the final preseason game, a couple of the roster storylines to pay attention to. Not a lot to break down from this game. The Texans didn't play a majority of their starters and really didn't play the majority of their two deep. There's a good amount of roster spots already filled up for this Texans team, and that's a good thing because there have been years where they've gone into the final game of the preseason and not really known who all is going to be on the two deep and who even is going to be starting in some of these spots. So it's a much more talented Texans roster, but there's still some things to be decided. And coming out of this preseason game, I don't know how we can't for sure know that Cam Akers is on this team. I don't know if he's running back 2. I don't know if he's running back 4. I don't know if he's running back 3, but Cam Akers needs to be on this team. He has made the most of every opportunity that has been given to him in the preseason. From training camp to the preseason games, Akers has showcased vision. He's showcased speed. He's showcased quickness, agility, the ability to make people miss, everything that you would want out of a depth piece in your running back room. Now, remember, he's a depth piece, and the conversation about backup running back is hopefully a moot one. Joe Mixon's a bell cow. Joe Mixon really doesn't miss games, and last year, the other 3 Bengals running backs that weren't Joe Mixon combined for just 61 carries over the course of the entire season. So you may not need to worry too much about backup running backs, but Mixon is closer to 30, and he might be due for a couple of games missed. So who would be the backup backs in those games? Well, I believe it's going to for sure be Cam Akers. Dare Ogunbowale is going to be on this team. And then it's the Dameon Pierce question, okay? Dameon Pierce did not suit up for the final preseason game. Now, you can look at it one of two ways. The first way you can look at it is that Dameon Pierce is on this team, and that's why he didn't play in this preseason game. DeMeco Ryans came to his defense twice this past week. Not enough opportunities running the football to showcase what Dameon Pierce could do after the preseason game last week, where he had just 5 yards on 4 carries. And then DeMeco Ryans went on to say that he was unhappy with the blocking from that game as well. So a good amount of defense from Dameon Pierce. And so the head coach is defending the guy. He didn't play in the final preseason game. You can look at it as Dameon Pierce on this roster, and he's going to be in the running back room. You can also look at it the other way, which is the way that I feel like a lot of people hope it's going. They were preserving Dameon Pierce, keeping him from getting hurt because they might be able to trade him to another team. Now, again, I don't believe Dameon Pierce has any sort of massive value that you can go out there and get some draft pick you're going to be super excited for. It's going to be a late-round pick if you can move him, but it might behoove Pierce and the Texans to split and give Pierce a fresh start somewhere else in a system that is more adept towards his skill set. I feel like that's where a lot of people are leaning after some of the poor preseason game performances and the lack of consistency in practice. But if the Texans are indeed unhappy with the blocking that occurred when Pierce was in the games and in training camp practices, then perhaps they see something for him on this roster. So if it's Joe Mixon, Cam Akers, Dare Ogunbowale, and Dameon Pierce, that means Jawar Jordan, British Brooks, J.J. Taylor, they all lose out on a spot on this roster. No massive loss, though. British Brooks has showcased a little, and Jawar Jordan has showcased a little, and maybe you could get them on the practice squad. I could say the same for J.J. Taylor. I would also offer a Cam Akers-like scenario for Dameon Pierce. A year ago, Akers began the season on the Rams. They were going to see if he could fit, they could get him going. Ultimately, he got traded to the Minnesota Vikings a few weeks into the regular season. Perhaps that's the route the Texans will take with Dameon Pierce, but the next few days we'll have a better understanding and a better picture of that running back room. But here's what I do know about the running backs. It should include Cam Akers after the preseason that he's had. The only worry I'd have about Akers is the durability because of the injury history that he does have and the 2 Achilles injuries. You know, maybe a third Achilles injury or another leg injury coming off of those would pop up, but you can't think about players that way. And durability would be an issue if he was the number 1 running back or the number 2 with no other options on the team. That is not the situation for Cam Akers and the Houston Texans. He's just a piece of the room that hopefully doesn't get utilized that much because Joe Mixon takes care of his business. A moment here for my friends at Prize Picks, the best and easiest way to play daily fantasy, and you play your first 5, you get a $50 bonus with my code Stoots, S-T-O-O-T-S, at the link in the description down below. It is so easy to put together a couple of stat predictions, more or less, and find yourself with a chance to win on your entry. You could even sometimes 100 times your entry. Turn $10 into 1,000. Don't mind if I do. You can do it with my friends at Prize Picks. They've even got the flex entries, so you don't have to hit every piece of your entry to win something. Isn't that great? Doesn't that sound fantastic? And goodness knows I need the flex entry help as well. I mean, look how easy it is. This is week 1 of the NFL season that you're looking at. Stroud in Indianapolis versus the Colts. Tua Tagovailoa against the Jaguars. It's just more or less on passing yards or receiving yards or rushing and receiving touchdowns. And you can even do NFL season-long entries as well. It's so easy. You just throw it together. It can be done in as little as 60 seconds. And, of course, you're going to get that $50 bonus when you play your first 5 and use my code Stoots, S-T-O-O-T-S, at the link in the description down below. Play your first 5. Get that $50 bonus from the easiest way and the best way to play daily fantasy, my friends at Prize Picks. The wide receiver situation is an interesting one as well. Over the course of camp, it has fluctuated. It's been Xavier Hutchinson and Ben Skoranek on, John Mechie, Robert Woods, Steven Sims out. Then there was the flip. After Mechie had the successful performance in the preseason game last week. So it's John Mechie on, Ben Skoranek and Robert Woods and Steven Sims out on this one. Woods has had some nice moments in the preseason. Maybe he's on. Ultimately, I feel like the Texans have 2 wide receiver spots. They need to fill it with a pick from Xavier Hutchinson, John Mechie, Robert Woods, Steven Sims, and Ben Skoranek. And I would tell you that Xavier Hutchinson and John Mechie would be the 2 that I would select for those couple of spots here for the Texans. I mean, it feels like they have put together in the past couple of weeks the most consistency. Woods is an older player. He can help you out a little bit. He does have some special teams usefulness in the return game, which is something that Hutchinson and Mechie don't have, but perhaps you can find that returner somewhere else on the roster. Heck, we just talked about keeping Dameon Pierce. Perhaps he could help you in the return game because you get rid of Robert Woods. Now, this 2 wide receiver spot gets complicated if Noah Brown can't go to begin the season. If Noah Brown is on short-term IR to begin the season, then it's Robert Woods versus Skoranek versus Steven Sims, and I'd probably keep Robert Woods at that point. You need a guy to come in, run a couple of routes, trust him to do what he needs to do, score a touchdown. Woods could do that over the course of a month. And again, this is a depth conversation about the wide receiver room that you hope you really don't have to have because Stefon Diggs and Nico Collins and Tank Dell handle everything, and you really don't have to dip in to the depth of this team. But these are guys that are going to play important special teams moments for the Texans over the course of the season. So that's something to think about as well. I'd lean Hutchinson and Mechie to make this. There were moments where I thought Mechie wasn't going to make it. He has come on strong here towards the back end, including some nifty moves in this preseason finale that were adding to his resume and his case to make this team. And finally, a couple of spots because of what we saw in the preseason finale and down the stretch here in training camp that I feel like the Texans should be exploring for a veteran. I would start with the cornerback spot. I just don't know what the status of Jeff Okudah is, who's been hurt and missed a lot of time. Is he going to be ready for week 1 to be in that cornerback room? CJ Henderson has not impressed much. I think back to the Pittsburgh game where George Pickens just kind of lost him, and it hasn't really looked good since then. Henderson hasn't gotten a lot of opportunities with guys you would consider starters since that moment in the preseason. So I would tell you CJ Henderson, not really there. Maybe Miles Bryant. He's had some good run support moments, but I don't know if the coverage is good enough for him. And then Desmond King, he may have lost his nickel cornerback spot to Jalen Petrie, and the transitioned position that Petry's going to be a little bit of safety, a little bit of nickel corner, slot corner, however you want to phrase it. So I'm not really sure exactly if Desmond King's making the team. He does help out in the return game in this preseason finale, though. He did muff a punt for a turnover and hand the Rams a really short field. So there's a lot to consider, but if the right veteran cornerback became available, I would think the Texans would be happy to claim that player on waivers or just out and out sign them if they made it to true free agency. So I'd look for cornerback as a spot for a veteran to fill as cut down day is around the corner. And I would also look for maybe those last couple of spots on the defensive line, a defensive tackle and maybe a defensive end. Not to say that there haven't been some moments from Marcus Harris or Malik Fisher or some of these other young guys along the defensive line, but just having the comfort of a veteran who's been around the block, played a lot of football, that could go a long way into rounding out that Houston Texans defensive line. So I'd be looking for a veteran on the defensive tackle spot and a veteran at the defensive end spot as cut down day approaches. And obviously, if Danico Autry was available, you probably wouldn't be looking for either of those things because he can play a little bit of inside and outside. Autry, of course, is set to miss those first 6 weeks. So a vet corner, a vet defensive end, and a vet defensive tackle. Maybe not all of those things, but those are positions that I'd be looking for and be thinking about adding if I was the Houston Texans. What say you? What'd you make of the preseason finale? Akers and Pierce, Akers or Pierce? Let me know in the comment section down below. What veteran positions would you chase as well? Let me know in the comment section down below. On your way down there, throw me a thumbs up on the video. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Check out our friends at Prize Picks. Man, it's so easy to play daily fantasy, and daily fantasy with football that matters is here. College, pros, regular season right around the corner, and sprinkle in a little baseball here and there. You can even do season-long NFL. Get in on it the easiest way to play daily fantasies with my friends at Prize Picks. The link in the description down below. Play your first 5 and get $50 in bonus. My code Stoots, S-T-O-O-T-S. Appreciate you watching. Hope you enjoyed the video. I can't wait until we talk Texans again soon.